Okay, ladies and gentlemen, time for another episode of Reading the Constitution. Today is Thursday, April 4th, 2019, and we're going to look at Article 1, Section 2, which is all about the House of Representatives. So let's get started here. Now, if you remember where we left off last time, we had just finished Section 10. So now we've got in Article 1, and we covered all the sections except for Section 2 and 3, which covers the House, and 3 is the Senate. So today we're going to do Section 2. So, but before we do that, we'll just review one more time Section 1, which is pretty short, so we'll just read that one more time. It says, all legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and House of Representatives. So this is where it just determines that there's two houses of Congress, and there's one's the Senate and one's the House. And so we're going to do the House today. So what is Article 1, Section 2? It's all about the House of Representatives, and there's 5 clauses. So just as a little overview of what the clauses are about, Clause 2.1 is who chooses members. There's a 2-year term. It talks about the Elector qualifications. Clause 2.2 has to do with the eligibility requirements. And there's actually 3 requirements to be a representative. Clause 2.3 tells how to count persons. It also talks about there being a 10-year census every 10 years, and the number of representatives. Section 2, Clause 4 has to do with filling vacancies, and Clause 2.5 has to do with the Speaker of the House, and the power of impeachment. So let's start with 2.1 here. So 2.1 has to do with who chooses the members and the term. And well, let's look at that first. It says the House of Representatives shall be composed of members chosen every 2nd year by the people of the several states. So this says that who chooses the members is the people of the several states. And it also says that they're chosen every 2 years, every 2nd year. So that means it's a 2-year term for a representative. And it continues on here. It says, and the electors of each state shall have the qualifications requisite for electors of the most numerous branch of the state legislature. So it's kind of, I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I'm pretty sure they're talking about the electors being that's the people in the electoral college who will vote for the actual vote for the president. We'll get to it's in Article 3, where they talk about the electoral college. So this basically just sets the qualifications of the electors. And anyway, so that's 2.1. Let's move on to let's see what we're going to do, 2.2. And this is the eligibility requirements of a representative. And there's only 3 things. And I'll read it. It says, no person shall be a representative who shall not have attained the age of 25 years and been 7 years a citizen of the United States, who shall not, when elected, be an inhabitant of that state in which he shall be chosen. So, this is really like, this is like kind of the ineligibility. They put it in a negative. They say, you can't be a representative unless you're 25 years old. And you have to be a citizen of the United States for 7 years. And you notice you can also be a naturalized citizen. You don't have to be a native-born American citizen. You could have just moved here, immigrated, and be naturalized, and as long as it's 7 years, you could become a representative. And the other thing is you have to be an inhabitant of the state in which you're chosen. But it doesn't say how long you have to be an inhabitant. I mean, you could have literally just moved there like, last week, and you're already eligible to be a representative. Okay, next, 2.3 is next, but we're going to skip 2.3 for now because it's kind of long, and we'll just jump to 2.4, which is pretty simple. 2.4, that's Clause 2.4, has to do with filling vacancies. And it says, when vacancies happen in the representation from any state, the executive authority thereof shall issue writs of election to fill such vacancies. So a vacancy happens like if someone dies, or maybe they leave for some other reason, and now there's an empty spot where there's no representative. The executive authority, just probably going to be like the governor of the state, should issue a writ of election. So they can basically, you have to elect a new representative. And that's all it says in 2.4. So let's move 2.5. We'll do the last one here. 2.5 is the House of Representatives shall choose their speaker, and other officers shall have the sole power of impeachment. So there's two things there. One is they can choose the Speaker of the House. And I think if you look nowadays in 2019, I believe it's Nancy Pelosi of the Democratic Party. And the Speaker usually ends up being the kind of the head of the majority group in the representatives. But they could choose the Speaker of the House. And it's a very important position because if you look at another section, we'll get to it later, I believe the Speaker is in line to be president after the Vice President. If the President was to die and then the Vice President was to die, I think the Speaker of the House would be the new Commander-in-Chief. And the second part, this is where the House of Representatives is given the power of impeachment. And it says the sole power of impeachment. So only they can impeach. And remember, impeachment means they kind of put on trial some officer of the United States. It could be the President, the Vice President, it could be a Supreme Court Justice, or really any officer. So almost any position where you have to swear an oath can be impeached. Okay, now let's look at 2.3. And let me go back to the original Constitution here. You can see there's Article 1, and you can see Section 2. And the second one is the long one. And if I look in this picture here, oh, that's not it. It's the next, it's the second page there. So there you see Article 1. And there you see Section 2. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The big one is the third one. So that's what we'll tackle now. We'll tackle clause number 3. And I've actually broken it down into two parts. I've called it 2.3 A and B. And by the way, again, these are not numbers that are in the Constitution. I'm just making these numbers for clarification. So the first part has to do with how to count persons. And I'll just read it here. It says, representatives and direct taxes shall be apportioned among the several states which may be included within this union according to the respective numbers. So you have to count the number of people in each state. You know the population, and because they're going to use it to determine how many representatives, and also direct taxes, how to apportion those things. So continuing on, it says, which shall be determined by adding the whole number of free persons, including those bound to service for a term of years, and excluding Indians not taxed, three-fifths of all other persons. So you see they count, every person who is free is counted as one person. And that includes like, men, women, children, babies, anyone who's a free person is counted as one. And also they include anyone who's a bound to service for a term of years, which I think they called indentured servitude. So it was kind of like you were bound to work for somebody for maybe like 10 years or something, because you owed a debt to them. Maybe that's how the people would come to the United States. They would, wouldn't have any money, but someone would pay their way, and then they would owe them 10 years of service. But they excluded Indians who were not taxed, and anyone else who wasn't a free person or an indentured servant or an Indian, they counted 3/5 of those people. So, for example, I suppose if you had someone who was, from France or somewhere who was living there, an immigrant, but it wasn't a citizen, he would count as 3/5. Now, this is all in brackets, you can see here, because according to the book I have, and I'll show you the book here, this book here, it says the Constitution, what it means. According to that book, it's been modified by Amendment 14, Section 2. So at some point, later we'll get to the amendments and we'll see where this is modified. Okay, so that's the first part of 2.3. And again, this has been modified. And the second part of 2.3 is here. And I've actually broken it into two parts. It's really just one big paragraph. But there's two parts here. And this next part, I call it 2.3b. It says, the actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States and within every subsequent term of 10 years in such manner as they shall by law direct. So this basically says that they're going to have a census every 10 years. So if you live in the United States, you're probably familiar with every 10 years. Usually it's on the whole years like 2010, 2000. There'll be one in 2020. when they come around and take a census, they have to count how many people are living in each house. And you can see that this is actually a really important thing because it's used to determine how many representatives there will be in from each state. So by law, they have to count it. So if a census taker comes around to your house, you are by law required to answer his questions and fill out the form and everything. So and this is right in the Constitution. So I'll continue on here with the second part of this. It says the number of representatives shall not exceed one for every 30,000. But each state shall have at least one representative. So you can see that they limited the number of reps at this point here to one for every 30,000. And but every state, even if you have if there was less than 30,000 citizens in one state, or people, or persons, you would still get at least one. And continuing on, it says, and until such enumeration shall be made, the state of New Hampshire shall be entitled to choose 3, Massachusetts 8, Rhode Island and the Providence Plantations 1, Connecticut 5, New York 6, New Jersey 4, Pennsylvania 8, Delaware 1, Maryland 6, Virginia 10, North Carolina 5, South Carolina 5, and Georgia 3. Now, if you add those up, I believe it comes out to 65. So the original number of representatives was actually 65 representatives. And they chose those numbers just until they could actually do a census. And up in there, the first part there says that the first actual enumeration of a first census had to be made within 3 years of the first meeting of Congress. So after they actually counted the number, these numbers no longer apply. They actually did it by counting the number of people. So anyway, that's basically 2.3. And that's the whole Article 1, Section 2. So that's the House of Representatives. And we covered all 5 clauses. So now we're down to the very last thing I have to do in Article 1 is going to be Section 3 about the Senate. And that'll be the next episode.